recognize that your experience isn't always true for everyone. And I think that's going to be a dimension to this that I hope is helpful to you all. And hopefully, when I was thinking about if I was in your shoes, and presumably at your ages, I'm a little bit older than you, what I would have wanted to hear when I was trying to figure out how to plan my life and figure out how to use my skills and do what I wanted. All right, let's share. Can y'all see my screen?
You're good.
Awesome. Oh, I forgot that this does overlays. Not that it really matters, but all right, so here's my talk. Sarah graciously invited me to talk to you about what it's like to be an indie developer or an indie game maker. And I just thought this would be a nice tone to set, a nice mood. This is an Edward Hopper painting. He's a famous 20th century artist. You might be seeing a little bit art in this. You might be a little confused. This is a video game presentation, but I'm showing you art. Uh, that's a conversation in itself, and now I'm getting distracted, but we'll keep going. One of the things that I want to just sort of establish for you all is I'm going to be as honest as humanly possible as I can be with you all from my experience about what it's like to be an indie dev. And I think there's sometimes a lot of fantasy that goes into working in technology and this, and especially into games. And I don't want to pop anyone's bubbles, but I want to be honest with you about sometimes how hard it can be, but also sometimes how great it can be, because ignoring obstacles can sometimes make if ignoring the obstacles doesn't actually help you achieve a dream. I'll just put it that way. If indie games are a dream for you, if you do have a game or an idea or friends that you want to work with, a studio and whatnot, so just know I'm going to be honest. And yeah, that's just what I do. There are three sections to this talk. I'm going to talk about me. This is obviously going to be a bit autobiographical. Two, I'm going to talk about indie lives, and I'll say a little bit more as I say indie lives. And my last thing is going to be talking about more choosing a life, because you're obviously all programmers. You're probably the most in-demand employees the economy wants right now. You won't have trouble finding jobs, especially if you're nice and easy to work with and good at what you do. And in that situation, when you have a smorgasbord, sometimes you have to think about what you actually want. So me, I'm this woman seated in this motel room surrounded by things. Not really, but I just thought this is an interesting image that we'll come back to later. I'm a writer, designer, and a researcher. To speak specifically about writing, my original start was in theater. I did a lot of plays, 3-act plays, short plays. I spent a little bit of time in New York. Then I realized I don't care about theater in that way. I like it, but I don't want to write it. And then I realized I really care about video games. So I wanted to become a video game designer. So I went to grad school for that. And meanwhile, all of that was happening. I've been a researcher. So I've been working in market research and brand strategy, i.e. focus groups, for over a decade, where I've basically been a qualitative and moderator, doing quantitative analysis, doing graphic design, a whole bunch of different things in that realm. So when I say 10 years of I've done 10 years of consumer research, I can tell you exactly how smart consumers are and people don't want to admit, and also exactly how dumb they are. So if you hear some things that are potentially depressing about what the marketplace is, please know it's not coming from some sort of cynicism. It's coming from you have to work around what you get. To speak more specifically about games, I've been making games of steadily improving quality since 2013. On the left, you see two images from games that I made when I was at Carnegie Mellon. I was part of the ETC grad school program there. These are like some of the first experiences I ever made. One was a gritty subway game where you have to rescue someone. Another was a cute little game where you were a cat riding a dolphin and you can become unlikely friends. Those are both short 5-minute experiences that I learned a lot on. The next game you see is a game called Locanimals, which is one of my master thesis that I spent over a year on when I was there, which was a location-based creature collection game that I made with my friends that we were hoping to turn into an indie studio. And that didn't work out because we made that game, we tried our best. And also then a year later, Pokemon Go came out. So fun. Since then, since I graduated from grad school, you can see I have like a one still of a game jam game that I participated in when I first moved to Austin that I actually won, which is fun, where you're on a Japanese game show hosted by a Shiba Inu, and you have to catch money as you fall out of a plane without a parachute. Um, and also a picture of some of my friends that I made Look Animals with and worked on some past games with and continue to talk to and collaborate with, playing one of my board games. And board game prototypes, unfortunately, don't photograph very well. So basically, since 2013, I've been doing a lot of different, since Look Animals, I've been doing a lot of different short films, writing scripts, doing different things, exploring what I want my life to be like. Upcoming, probably releasing, you probably might have heard Sarah and I talking about this at the start of the talk, but figuring out I'm releasing this. I'm going to play a trailer for a game that I've been working on for the past year and a half.
I am myself. 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 I am. Wake up! Who am I?
Oh, how do I stop this?
Myself.
So here's low-key tip number one: never put a delivery date on your game, because we were supposed to release in September. We were supposed to release in March, but that's getting into another story. But hey, look, I made that game. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but yeah, the games have been steadily improving in quality. I'm sorry, I'm not like Jonathan Blow, and you're not seeing like a game-changing, like brilliant thing, but I'm pretty happy with it.
Okay, stop it, John. Stop it.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
We'll edit that out. We'll fix it in post, that part. All right, let's get back to this. Oh no! All right. So, all right, here's my point. If you want to be an indie, I've got some questions for you. If you just want to make games, nothing is stopping you. You obviously also have this, one of the core skill sets, you can program. So yeah, nothing is absolutely stopping you if you want to make indie games. Get a job at some place that doesn't own everything that you create outside of work. Make things. Be a hobbyist. Do game jams. Make things just for you. Make things just for your friends. All of that's okay. But if you're attending this talk and you're thinking about being an indie, I think you're probably thinking about this in sort of like the royal indie, like the sort of fantasy indie, where you're a solo dev and you make an amazing game. You make an income from your games. You make an indie studio where you're making your own games. Maybe you get a publisher involved. Maybe you get investments. But ultimately, what I'm going to take away from this, or going to assume with the rest of this talk, is this isn't necessarily for the hobbyist. This is for someone that actually wants to make games that people will play and presumably pay money for. So now that we've set that up, I want to ask a central question of you to consider. Do you actually want to be an indie, or do you need something else? In writing, there's this concept of wants versus needs. I should also tell you I studied psychology when I was in college, so this is probably going to be a bit like, might seem a little like self-helpy or psychology, but yeah, that's just how my brain works. But wants versus needs. The idea is that sometimes the thing that you want, for instance, I want to make an indie game, isn't actually connected to what you need. So in the sense of, you want to make an indie game, but what you need is, I want to get money. I want to become famous. I want to impress people. I want to or it also doesn't have to necessarily be something like that, which I'm presenting in a negative light. It could also be things like, I want to contribute to the roguelike genre. Like, I want to push roguelikes even further. A lot of people are trying to do that. Here's a hard truth. If you're thinking about wants versus needs, if you want to be the next Jonathan Blow, if you want to create a game that's going to be in the MoMA or the Guggenheim, you want to be the next Among Us, and you want to make a game that just prints money that everyone's playing, that's a cultural smash. Some harder truths. You want to be in games because you think you're going to be able to buy a house. You think you can have a sort of balanced life where you're not going to gain like 15 to 20 pounds because you've been in crunch for 6 months. You think you're going to have enough money to potentially save for your kid's college fund or save for vacations or whatnot. Some even the hardest truths. You want to make an indie game because maybe that there's some bit of jealousy or envy inside you, which isn't necessarily the worst thing. It can be a good motivator in balance if it's taken in balance. But in the context of this, like, these are all games. Every game I'm showing you to here right now was made by someone I went to school with or is being worked on by like one of my friends. So Legends of Runeterra, Superliminal, Enter the Gungeon, the new Miles Morales game, Diablo 4, mobile games from Rumble. And there's a bunch of other games that you can talk about. So what I want to basically tell you right now is to be an indie does not mean you're going to get celebrity status. You're not going to change the game. You're not going to get a ton of money. And you also might not get love and validation if that's what you're actually seeking. The creator of Antichamber, his name's Alexander Bruce. He had a very interesting tweet thread from September where he started talking about his game, which if you're not familiar with it, you should check it out, especially if you like puzzle or perceptual games. It was probably one of the big indie games of the second or third wave of indie games. He made a ton of money from it. It was a huge success. I saw him speak at GDC. And here he starts saying, once I started rejecting this idea of success, it became more and more apparent how much I'd left behind in order to get to where I was. When people would say, I wish I had what you had, my response was, along which axis? So I want you to keep that in the back of your minds as you're considering what you do, because obviously you have a lot of skill, you have a lot of choice in what you can do, and realize that when you make a choice, sometimes different doors close to you, and sometimes paths in life your path in life, especially if you choose indie, will be different. And I want to be honest with you about that and what it can feel like. So a big question of to be an indie is one, to question and understand what is motivating you. If it was one of those things where I was speaking some hard truths, you need to reconcile with that, because I think that's what's going to be healthy for you in the long run. And healthy for you, both mental health and also for you creatively, if it is something you want to consider. So let's start talking about indie lives. Here we have another painting by Hopper. It features a number of people all seated outdoors. I think they're on like a party barge or something. It's a very venerable cast of characters. Seems to be in a different role or in different wealth levels too. And one of the reasons I want to talk about indie lives is because there are 3 mechanics to basically indie life and that you need to master if you're going to survive as an indie. First one is you, because that's the thing that you have the most control over, and some might say the only control over. Money, which is the mechanic that rules and guides all of our lives, whether you want to admit it or not. And also people, which we'll talk a lot more about in depth, but I'm going to start with you, obviously, because you're all listening. And to be an indie, you have to be both the dog and the fire. This is pretty much the meme of our times. And when I was looking through it, I found these variants that kind of spoke to me, because to be an indie is to sort of navigate contradictions and to be able to navigate extremes. So let's talk about being the dog in this particular image. You need to push through despite everything. I can show you actually my to-do list, which I write out on physical paper, because that helps me, because I like having physical things in my space, oddly enough. But there are tons of them. I have like 8 or 10. And guess what? You have to finish your UI. You have to solve this problem while everything else is burning around you. You have to be able to compartmentalize the aspect of the game and prioritize what you need to work on, even though it all needs work. You also have to leverage what you have to make what you can. If your house is on fire and you are making a painting, just add it to the painting. I mean, if you think about it, if you want to be strategic about it, look at Goat Simulator. They basically found a wonky physics game and then they turned it into sort of its own genre where you don't need to polish your physics, just lean into it. And also, to a certain extent, finding serenity in chaos as you navigate uncertainty. Because if you start freaking out because everything's going on, it's just going to fuck you up. Sorry if I'm swearing. But yeah, that's a sort of what you want to take away from this particular meme. Now, this meme being the fire, this can be interpreted several different ways. When you're an indie person, especially if you're the sort of go-getter, the person that's in charge, the ideas person, if you want to call it, which I don't think that's, yeah, you have to be the fire. You're always self-defining what the work is. There's no publisher sometimes telling you this needs to be better, this needs to be better. You have to push for it. But you also need to surround yourself with puppies because that's a hard way to live. So you need self-care. Another, I think, far more prescient way of thinking about this is when you're an indie, sometimes you will feel like the thing that's on fire. And when you look outside at your life and take a look at Facebook or Instagram and see how people are living, people from your cohort, your classmates, ones who take cushy software engineering jobs and see them buying real estate in San Francisco, and you've been working on a game for 2 years with no release date in sight, it can feel like you're the one that's on fire and everyone else is just normal and happy. And I think being aware of that is really important because I think that's something that can, if you look at a lot of the indie success stories, the people who gave up a lot to get to where they are, a lot of them are kind of unhappy or have some issues. And that's just a hard truth about that. Like, some balance is very hard to achieve in life. One thing I basically want to talk about this is you have to be delusional enough to think you can succeed, but honest enough with yourself to avoid disaster. A lot of actors, when they've talked about their stories of how they became successful, Matthew McConaughey, for one, while you're in Austin, like, he basically talked about every rejection, he would just be relentlessly positive about it all. I don't think you should be so positive and so optimistic that you're delusional to think that your 2D pixel art platformer about relationships is going to sell like 300,000 copies after Celeste came out a couple years ago. Like, you can't be delusional about those things. You still have to be honest about what is your game doing differently or extremely well. And a lot of this is coming from personal experience and my work experience, that publishers and consumers have absolutely no incentive to lie to you about how good your game is. Your parents and your friends can try to spare your feelings. They'll say things are good, even if they aren't. They might not also necessarily understand, but the people who are experts in your game, basically the people who fund entire studios and the people who put money on the line to buy your game and put their time into it, like, they're always going to be the most honest with you. And if you try to ignore that, good luck. Sometimes there are like the sort of low probability events of the things that are just outside the realm of people's understanding where they won't get it, but then it becomes your job to make them understand. If you are making a game that's that weird and that different, but also that good. So I'm not going to just tell you about this. I'm going to show it in action, but here's Vessels. This is the game I've been spent a year and a half on, 50% of it during COVID. So it's been a bit start and stop. I was the director on the game. I came up with the premise and the idea of it. Basically, you're trapped inside an airlock. You have no memories and whatnot. And the people, your crew, are sort of asking you questions and you don't know how to answer them, but a voice basically keeps helping you and gives you the ability to come back from death and also to possess the crew members, and you have to pretend to be other people. An odd, weird game happening right now, considering airlocks and imposters are quite popular, and quarantine is the thing that we've been subjected to, all of us. But I was the producer on it, I was the narrative designer and the writer on it. I did the character design, I did the UI, I did all the business stuff. So like the marketing and trailer, all like this image I drew it, like I did all of this. Great. I did so much work. It's a 2 to 3 hour narrative adventure with over 5,000 lines of dialogue, and I'm selling it for $5. So I'm delusional enough to think that maybe we can sell some actual copies of this game and get people interested and maybe build like a fan base. But I'm also honest. In the visual novel, narrative, adventure genre, you need to have good art if you want to sell games. Generally, those games, when depending on the quality of the art, can sell anywhere from $10 to $20, especially for our length. You could look at Gone Home, Tacoma, any of those games to sort of get Firewatch to get a sense of how much those games actually sell for, but also the quality of the art and also voice acting that you get with it. If you want to start asking for more money, you're going to need to put some effort into it, and you need to do a lot of community building and indie game marketing. And to be completely honest, I would rather people play the game. I would rather someone look at the price tag and think, I'll just try it. And then realize that the game is actually kind of good versus paying seeing $10 to $15 and then seeing the art, which I didn't do. Just and seeing $10 to $15 and seeing the art, it's like, I don't think this is worth the money. And here's a key thing, which is why I highlighted in red. I'm not dependent on this game's success for money. And I purposely chose and built my life out in this way so I can create the games that I want to make. Would be nice to make money, yeah. But money is its own thing. And money, I'm going to assume, and no offense if you do have money, if you do have a trust fund, if you do have deep pockets, if you're really good at saving or whatnot, I just want to say this is about finding a sustainable approach for money, because I do think money is something that when you start dealing with it in games can get really messy. So sexy singles, pick a door, because your bachelor of your dreams is behind it. It's either your savings, your day job, or do or die. I'm not doing publishers or investments because you usually need to have a game before you do that. We'll start talking about savings, because this is the thing I think I see a lot of indies doing. I have friends that have done this. So yeah, you decided you don't need a 401k anymore. This is an ideal scenario that I think a lot of people fantasize about. Basically, I'll save up a bunch of money and then I'll have a bunch of time and then I can do whatever I want and I can make my dream game. But here's the kicker. Games are always going to take more time, money, and iteration than you could ever imagine. A lot of people are biased towards sort of positive events and positive outcomes. So they don't want to acknowledge the fact that games, the story of games is, well, this was broken. I had this great idea. It didn't work. And I had to keep iterating on it until it finally did work. And it looked nothing like I began with. So a lot of people, I think sometimes when they pursue the savings path, I'll get into the playthroughs, but basically here, there's also some logistical things. Can you stick to a budget? Can you make a budget? Do you have family? If you're thinking about doing this when you're sort of mid-career, do you have loans that you need to pay for? Do you have employees that you're going to need to pay for? Playthroughs of savings is you spent the first 6 months of your savings fussing around because you didn't account for the fact that you had been working in a 9 to 5 for most of your life. And all of a sudden, when you have to be self-directed and you have to set your own schedule, you find that time going to like Reddit or Twitter. You need cash flow because after the first 1 to 2 years, the game isn't done. And then you either go back to work or you start depending on spouses, friends, Kickstarters in order to finance the game. Because after 1 to 2 years, you feel like you need to have something to show. And without something to show, then it's like, what was I doing with that time? So some sort of sunk investments. And there's also the truth of it. You succeed, but that money could have been compounding interest. There's this funny thing that money does where money can turn into more money. And as Sarah once told me, games are a terrible return on investment. And that's really true. If you liquidate $20,000 of your savings and you make a game that sells only $1,000, really ask yourself, why do you want to make this game? If you want the experience, if you just want to say I made a game and I paid $20,000 for that experience, go for it. But if you went into that thinking like, I'm going to make this 20,000 back and then some, you're better off putting that into like the stock market and you just point and throw it at a stock and it'll be better. Here's a success story of savings. I actually know some of the devs on this team of Enter the Gudgeon from Godroll. They're actually local to Austin. They moved to Austin after they finished the game. Savings works best if you want to pursue this path, if you already have a prototype, if you've already tested your idea, if it's already fun, if there's already a kernel or a seed that's provable there. That's something that happened with them where when they had to tap into their savings to work on the game, they already had a solid prototype. They already had a good idea. They already had some like strong idea of what they were doing. And sometimes when people pursue the savings path, they get lost in sort of the prototyping and pre-production phase where they're trying to figure out what something is. And then by the time they realize what it is, they're out of money. Pre-production phases in AAA can be years. So you have to think about it like that. All right, day job. This is what I do. So basically you like to work a lot. You get money and you get a safety net, which is how I like to live my life, but it also means you have no free time. Your day job in an ideal scenario could actually be relevant to your field. Like you could work in games and they let you work on side projects or different indie games as long as it's not a competitor. But there's always going to be a ceiling on how much you can produce, especially if you're doing the same kind of work you do during the day and then you go home and then you start doing it at night. It's exhausting. And also depending on your life stage, if you want to have kids someday, there are going to be trade-offs. Two of my best friends on the Bay Area, they collaborate all the time. They have day jobs. They collaborate all the time on little games or experiences, apps. They have a kid now. All their time goes to their child and to their day jobs now. So there's a window where day jobs actually work. In terms of playthroughs, this first bullet is basically the story of my life working on vessels. You have sort of spurts of productivity, but your day job gets busy and that pays your bills. So your project starts collecting dust. So you better be super fucking good at commenting your code and sort of organizing your stuff when you pick it up in 1 to 2 months and you have to figure out, how does this game actually work? What was I doing? You're gonna have days where the motivation's just not there for either of your jobs. And unfortunately, it's also comes with feelings of feeling in between your different lives as you're sort of living them. And that can weigh on people. It's not always so bad though. One of my friends, his name's Arseni, he works at Sony in London. So he works on titles like Spider-Man, a bunch of other things. And in his free time with his partner, they have a studio called Party for Introverts, where they basically create small, very intimate, emotional games with very story focused or philosophy focused that are scaled based on the time and skills that they have. They're not trying to create some AAA MOBA competitor in their spare time that's going to take them 5 years. They're thinking very like sustainably of like, all right, this is how much time and I want to make a game that's important to me. This is how it works for them. Ultimately, it's a model I personally want to try to emulate. Do or die. This is obviously really straightforward. This is you want to just go out without a day job, without a savings account, presumably no trust fund to fall back on, and be like the starving artist and make money from your games. Games function like you have to sell games. How fast can you output games? I'm going to be a little bit tiger mom with you all. And if you have the skills, I don't necessarily know why you need to suffer in this way. I'm sure you could find work that helps pay the bills so you don't have to feel a sense of unease or sort of economic instability or poverty if you do choose this life. There are people that do make it work. And there is no shame in this path. You're just picking a very hard path. This is like the hard starter in Pokemon. There are different playthroughs. Basically, you are poor for a very long time, either until you're successful or you get an actual job. That's how it goes. Or you just keep living on the knife's edge. The older you get, the sicker you'll get. The more life events will pass you by or seem unattainable or out of reach for you, and that pressure will just increase. Or you might find that you're actually good at something and lean into where you start getting attention and diversify your income streams, which I think is a very smart perspective. You can go on Twitter and see a lot of these people who do that. They make asset packs. They are very good at one particular thing, like shaders. They have Patreons or GoFundMe's to help them when bad things happen. They do commissions, or they find suitcases of money. Or they join mid-level marketing schemes and sell people candles or whatever people do in those schemes. But when I think about money and dreams, I think about this 30 Rock episode where Liz, Tina Fey, is walking down the street, and off this bus comes this singing beautiful ingenue, and this beautiful voice. After she's done singing, she turns and says, "Say, where does a young prostitute get started in this town?" And the joke here is that you think you're going off and pursue your dreams, but you didn't prepare, you didn't have money, you didn't have the skills, and you thought you were going to star on Broadway your first year, but you're just going to end up waiting tables for like 5 years. That is, I think, and I'm someone who moved to New York trying to be a playwright, and I'm telling this to you now. The sort of wonderful but low probability events of you just smashing it out of the park your first time are very unlikely. When I show you the games like this is a very small game. It's not asking a lot from its consumer or from the devs. This game was achievable because they were experienced devs. They had shipped multiple titles by the time they got to making Enter the Gungeon, if you're familiar with it. Like the sort of myth of like, this is my first game, that's not what happens. You're seeing the first game because it's commercially viable. But basically what I'm trying to say with this is be careful around money and have honest conversations around money, because a lot of people try to avoid it because they don't like feeling poor. They don't like talking about it. It's uncomfortable. But it's also a situation that can create desperation and force you into lives that maybe you don't necessarily want to have. Here's my path, and I'm show not tell. 2009, I graduated from college into the recession. I had to get a day job. I hated my day job. So in 2010, I decided I was going to do the do or die path, and I was going to become a playwright. I got a job at the Dramatists Guild, which is a great thing. I met a lot of 20th century playwrights there. And I also had to work retail at Banana Republic in Rockefeller Center, where every day was like Christmas. And as you can see in 2010, I rejoined my day job back in research. That again wasn't enough. And then in 2012, I decided to go to CMU, where I went to a game grad school where I could learn about what I wanted to do. When I graduated, I didn't have enough experience, so no one wanted to hire me, and ended up back at my day job doing research. And it's only in the past 3 years that I've figured out my life and how I've wanted to create it, that I've created parallel lives. Basically, one half of my life is doing market research and graphic design for people that helps pay my bills. And the rest of my time goes to making games and doing the creative projects that actually really sustain me and fulfill me. And that's a life that I didn't fall into. What you're seeing is someone who tried different paths and built a life that ultimately I'm kind of happy with. Even though I want my games to have better art in the future and better games, but if you looked at my timeline, the games are improving. Matthew Weiner, he's the writer of Mad Men. He had a very interesting article. I know he was canceled, rightfully so, but sometimes evil people or bad people can speak truths, which is get a day job, but don't get too good at it, especially if you do want to pursue an indie life and you do want to push into that. You have to be careful sometimes about your day jobs if you want to pursue that path, because they're going to ask a lot of you. Sometimes they can, especially if you want to make money. There's a trade-off. But even if you go sort of like the retail, smaller paycheck route, like sort of like actors do with more flexible timing, how much are you going to be standing on your feet? Obviously, I don't think any of you are going to choose to be waiters unless you do. And again, there's no shame in that. I've been a waiter. But there's always a trade-off. It's never going to be easy. Here's the next chapter that I want to talk about, which is people. I should have picked a better picture of me. But one of the things about being an indie is finding your tribe, and it's finding the people that you can connect with and help you. As you sort of enter into the world, you hear this a lot. It's always about who you know, especially in creative industries. And this is a phrase I'm going to tell you right now that I used to hate. Because I used to think that you could just be as skilled as possible, you could be as talented as possible, you could be as hardworking as possible, and that would carry you through. And I'm here to tell you right now that is not true in any sense of the regard. Who you know is can be a huge boon to you and a huge anchor if you don't, depending on who you are and how you live your life. So I want to ask you all a question to think about this, because you're surrounded by your cohort. Do you view relationships as transactional or genuine? These are me and some of my friends that I went to grad school with. When you look at them, do you see them who they are, what they like to joke about, what they care about, what they're insecure about? Do you know that? Or do you see a smorgasbord of AAA companies, indie companies, fintech, indie, mobile, social networks that you could potentially work at? Because I'm going to tell you right now that basically people are a lot smarter, I think, than you give them credit for. They will always, I think, eventually figure out what your intent is and how you behave and how you treat them. I'm going to tell you a little bit story of this. This is the director of Moonlight. He won an Oscar. His name is Barry Jenkins. He is obviously a very handsome man, a very talented man, an award-winning man. And for several years before he did Moonlight, he wasn't doing anything in film. He made one mumblecore film, I think, in the early 2010s. It didn't do well, didn't make that much waves. And then he sort of escaped into advertising and other work. And his story is ultimately one about who you know and how those relationships can sustain you. His friends, who are film producers, approached him to get back into movies because they wanted him to make movies again and they believed in him. They basically pulled him away from that other life that he was living. His screenwriter and him connected over their shared background. They basically opened up to each other about what their childhoods were like. If you haven't seen Moonlight, you should watch it. And those conversations, that connection helped inform the script and film. If you watch the movie, it's a deeply personal film. And he ultimately, the story of this, what this movie is about people who help each other find themselves. Again, watch Moonlight, it's a great film. But what this story is this is a man who had made one feature-length film, made a huge indie smash that beat La La Land for Best Picture and Best Director. And it's all because of the people in his life that he had genuine connections with. I think there's some level of truth to the idea of there will be some people that you will always love and you will always care about and will always help you. It'll be easy. And there's the truth of like sometimes you don't want to burn bridges and you just want to be nice to people. But it's about sort of figuring out the people in your life that you care about, because those people will come through for you. Every games job interview I've gotten when I've ever considered AAA or educational games or whatnot, I've gotten through is from a friend. I literally just submitted a design test to a studio out in LA because of a friend put me up for the role and submitted my information to basically cut the line. Or not, it's a bad way of phrasing it, but basically she says, I know this person, I know what they are like to work with. We've worked on things together. I like him. I think he'd be good for the team. That's what's happening.
You did cut the line, but that's the way it
I
works.
did. I mean, I didn't cut the line for like, it's good nepotism because I am actually good.
But I mean, everybody, yeah, anybody who's good on the, if you're not number 100 on the queue for HR, you probably had some connection. So yes, but it is like functionally cutting the line is all I wanted to say.
Yeah. And I mean, just look at this in the context of like Sarah is a mentor. She's familiar in the game. She helped me. She's obviously trying to, and she's now become a friend where she's like helped me like figure out how I want to be in this career and be in this life, and help me with honest feedback about my game. You should really take note of who your friends are in someone. I think a mistake I used to make was putting a lot more investment on mentors. And mentors can be very helpful to you and they can provide you guidance, but your friends are ultimately the ones that are going to be to sustain you. I should also say, when you talk about people in indie game life, is that my life and sanity would not be possible without others who care for me. Do you have someone at home, I'm gay by the way, who will do the laundry for you when you're in crunch? Do you have someone that will make dinner for you? Do you have someone that will listen to you about your day? Do you have someone that will tell you a friend that will tell you harsh truths like, I don't think this game is good. This line is awkward. Some friends don't do that. Some friends are just nice, and you have to figure out the difference between nice and honest in a healthy way. But basically what I'm saying is if there's some aspect of your life, which was true for me at one point, which is if you need that kind of connection and you don't have it, indie games might bring you towards those people, the people that will like fulfill that role for you in your life. Sometimes they might not, and you have to question whether that loneliness or that sort of unhealthy social life is what you want. The hardest truth of what I'm trying to get here is, even if you're a solo dev, even if you have fantasies of being the next Lucas Pope or Jonathan Blow, you will only be successful because of the people in your life. If you want to be super literal about it, people have to buy your games. People have to like working with you. If you're working with a publisher, they have to know that you're not an asshole. I don't care if you're like, game looks really good. If you send some shitty condescending emails, good luck. Oh, it's not playing. But this is from a wedding from a year ago. One of these people in the picture is the one that got me the design test, who I saw when I was also at that wedding a year ago. I had two other friends basically ask me how I was doing with my career, if I was happy, if I wanted anything, if I wanted help. Basically, I think there are some truths to living genuinely, because it's always my genuine friends, the people that I've always taken an investment in, a real true investment in, that have always tried to help me. The people that I've never really tried to pretend to be nice to anyone that I didn't actually like, and see how that went. But there's a deeper point and a deeper lesson here that I want to talk about, which is my mom. She said it first: teach people how you want to be treated. You can look at this as sort of like the golden rule if you want to. But I'm going to show you this clip from Matthew Weiner's seminal show, Mad Men, which is a show about advertising in the 1960s. Here you'll see a woman talking to another woman about careers.
You have to start living the life of the person you want to be.
Is that what you did?
You're never going to get that corner office until you start treating Don as an equal. And no one will tell you this, but you can't be a man. Don't even try. Be a woman. It's powerful business when done correctly.
This is the 1960s. And I'll talk more about that.
Do you understand what I'm saying, dear?
I think so.
So just to dissect that clip and why I think it felt very true to me when I first watched it, and reminding me of advice I've been given, is if you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously. I've sort of made the mistake. My mom gave me that advice because I'm gay and half Asian and grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood where I was bullied and teased, that sometimes, and I know this worked for me, it's not going to work for everyone, that people will respond to the energy that you're giving off. I've spent a long portion of my career sort of being a student and treating people like teachers, and sometimes that doesn't actually work. To talk to a little bit about that sort of point about being, oh no.
You have to start living the life of the person you want.
When she talks about don't be a man, be a woman, obviously it's the 60s, it's a different time, but you can get somewhere in life by pretending to be someone else. I'm here to tell you that it's not going to last. I spent a long part of my life trying to sort of match the people that were around me and sort of hoping that would sustain my career, but that's not going to work. Because ultimately it's not who you are, and you'll deal with how that crumbles. And you have to do the work then of discovering who you actually are. And like I said, this isn't going to work for me. There are some people, depending on how you look, your gender, your sexuality, how able you are, they'll never treat you the way you deserve, you ask to be treated or deserve to be treated. That's just, I think, one of the fundamental cruelties of life. It's the asterisk on all of this. So I get to my last section where we talk about choosing a life. When I first started this, I knew I didn't want to do a bunch of video game images because I didn't want to. This is a famous image from the 19th century romanticism. And look at this, isn't this like romantic? If you think about indie life and you're choosing this indie life, you walk onto the edge of the cliff and see the beauty and the mists ahead of you. I originally was going to lead this research off with this, but I don't think it's accurate. I think this one is, which is by Edward Hopper, again, 20th century, where the malaise, I think, of the American experiment was starting to set in. And I picked this one. I would pick this for choosing your life because I want to ask you, who are you in this painting if you're considering or choosing an indie life? Are you the man that's sort of invested in his newspaper, sort of leaning into it, while the woman he presumably is with is sort of like off doing something else by herself? Are you the woman who's pressing the key onto the piano, not playing it, just playing with it, while the man in her life is sort of off doing other things? Obviously, art is sort of very obviously subjective. You can read a lot into this. And in the context of this, I see two potential lives where you do indie and the people around you are lonely or suffer for it, or you don't do indie and you wonder if you should have. Again, for effect, the Alexander Bruce quotes, "I wish I had what you had," and his response is, "along which access." A big part of my talk and what I want to talk to you about is figuring out what you want from life and figuring out how you want indie to fit within that. If you want to be I want to make that giant hit, I want to be the next Jonathan Blow, I don't care if I'm miserable in 10 years because all my friends have kids and I've still never gone on a date. If that's the life you want, just be honest about it. And to be an indie, you're more likely to get the life you want with honesty. This is the picture I used for me, which is a woman surrounded by beautiful objects and whatnot, yet she also doesn't seem terribly happy about it. Be honest about who you are and what you want and you need from life. Do you need, there's no shame in being materialistic. Do you want safety? Do you want comfort? Be honest about that. Do you want to have an adventure? Do you want to be one of those people that goes out and does like the hard thing, choose the path less traveled? Do it, but be honest about that and also take stock of your life. In the case of this, figuring out who you are within this sort of cast of characters, be honest about your circumstances, be honest about yourself, your skills, money, and the people that you have in your life and how you treat people, because your path will always be different than others. Some of those games that I showed, they're successful because of the people that they knew, in addition to a number of other factors. And the picture that I started out with, when you think about the sort of royal indie of, am I going to be very successful or not? You also have to ask yourself the converse. If you sell nothing, if you stay invisible and you feel alone, I want you to be honest with yourself. Would it be worth it? Is making the game enough? Is saying to the world, I made this enough? At my CMU program, I worked in this room where they had this sort of quote on the walls by Randy Pausch. He did the last lecture, which you can find on YouTube. Some of you have probably already seen it. I'd actually never seen it until I went to the program. I found it through a different way, different paths, where it says the brick walls are there to stop the people who don't want it badly enough. They're there to stop the other people. I think it's a quote that I was very resentful of for a long period in my life. But as I've gotten older, the more I realize how true it is. If you do want that sort of royal indie life, it's going to be hard. And I'm not going to lie to you about that. If you want to do a smaller indie life, that's more easy. That's sustainable. I've just shown you examples of people who've made it work and found ways to make it work. It's just figuring out what life you really want to have. There's some talks that if you are more interested about this, that you could go. Some of these are readings. Some of this are YouTube videos or GDC videos. Designing Your Life is written by Stanford professors who basically saw a bunch of smart people who didn't know what to do with their lives, because you can be good at school and bad at life. Don't Break the Chain by Jason Rohrer, who is like one of the first wave of big indies. I have mixed feelings about him now, even though I used to admire him because he said some weird things about AIDS. But again, he's found a way to pay for a family just making games. How to Survive for 11 Years Without a Hit. This is another do or dyer who has a family that he needs to feed. Guess what kinds of games he makes? He makes match 3 games. He makes seasonal match 3 games. And then there's The Last Lecture, which is pretty good. When I say pretty good, it's like it's very good. It's obviously had some sort of cultural influence. Those are some things I recommend if you're considering indie life and figuring out what you really want to commit your life to. So questions, and also now the last part of indie life, please wishlist then buy Vessels on Steam or itch. You can also go to www.vesselsgame.com to view our website and see our links. Please, if you will, wishlist and buy my game.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we have like about 5 more minutes. Obviously, if y'all need to head out, you are welcome to do so. But if you have any questions, feel free to just do it over voice or and chat. All right, so the question is, since your grad school project predicted Pokemon Go and Vessels predicted quarantine and Among Us, could you tell us what you're thinking of working on next so I can know what the future to prepare for?
My next game is going to be about songbirds. It's going to be about this Hawaiian bird called the Oo. You see some Reddit sub, it always comes back in subreddits, but it's about a bird with a beautiful song that goes extinct.
Damn it, John. Come on, give us a
Yeah.
happier future. Okay, now you know. Next, you said your game is narrative based. What narrative game do you take inspiration from?
My biggest inspiration is probably Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And just the N64 Legend of Zeldas, they had a profound impact on me. I think because Zelda is actually a low-key very good game and a very strong thematic game. It doesn't get enough credit for its writing and narrative design because the entire game is about time and sort of like the pains of growing up. Majora's Mask is about helping people. And honestly, I'm a psychology person. I'm very curious about people. I want to help people. This game, Vessels, if I was being completely honest with you, it started from a point of like, I want to make a game about an incel, uh, basically the kind of person you might imagine who becomes radicalized by a voice in their head that tells them that other people don't matter and you're the only person that does, against a diverse crew of women and other people, which I hope is prescient for this time. But yeah, I also take a lot of inspiration from, I think when you work in tech and games, you can be very insular, but there's a lot of writing out there that you should pay attention to. I have background in theater. Edward Albee has amazing plays. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? If you want to watch some seminal theater. Anton Chekhov. There's actually a game that just came out called The Cherry Orchard, which is a reimagining of it. Some books. I like A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. A lot of the themes and the things that I like are similar. In terms, if I wanted to talk about a modern game that I really liked, Hades has a really great narrative design. And I like Firewatch and I like Tacoma a lot as sort of like the walking simulator games, if you want to go into. I think they're very well written and really beautiful games. Though I think Tacoma should have had the courage to kill some people. Just because I think that. Oh, and TV. If you care about good writing in TV, if you care about good writing on screen, you should watch a lot of TV. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a really big influence on me, and so is Mad Men. Prestige, and then genre schlock.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? I have one question for you. This is for me, but I think the students will enjoy the answer. So honest answer, when you started working on Vessels, how much was your like, tell me about like how your expectations of developing a game to the point of polished enough to create versus prototype. Tell me about those expectations and when they changed and how they changed.
It probably changed several times where at the very beginning you think, oh my God, this game's going to be amazing. I showed these like this art direction that was like these cool like James Trell kind of light images and whatnot. And then as it was going on, I was like, oh God, like I thought this was achievable. Like, so I think my expectations and reality shifted. And I think that was something that I personally had to learn how to navigate, where the game isn't looking how I imagined it to be in my head for a long time. And it is a process. It's something, it's like a trial by fire. You just have to live through it, where the thing that you wanted it to be isn't exactly how it is. But in the end, like, I'm honest about that. I'm not terribly happy about the art in the game, but I'm pretty happy with the game. I'm very proud of myself that I achieved it. It was an idea that I had back in like 2013. I did nothing with, and then when I was in the program, or if I had to pitch the team, I had to figure out which one of these ideas I wanted to pitch, and I was like, I'm going to do the idea that makes me most excited, and I think there's a kernel there, and then we did it. So I'm very happy of the seeing it through. One piece of advice I didn't include in this is like, if you pursue doing indie games, there's this, only spend a year on your first game if you can. Learn as much as you can from your first game and keep moving to your second game. If you have a good idea, you'll get more good ideas. I think that's true, especially if you're creative. And if not, if you have one good idea, there are novelists that just keep writing the same novel over and over again. They do different characters and whatnot. They just keep trying to polish it and making it better to what it can be. There's no shame in that. My God, how many like redos of games are we gonna get? Like, there's, again, just make what you want to make and live with what you get.
All right. Well, again, thank you. I think we're going to sign off. Should I give them your contact info or no?
Sure, you can email me. That's my Twitter handle. I really hate Twitter. It makes me very angry.
Yeah, but
I try not to be angry on it, but whatnot. But feel free to email me or contact me if you're curious or have any questions. I'm sorry, I went a little bit over. I wanted more time for questions.
no, you're totally fine. I'll pass your email along after I have another class coming up. But thank you so much again for coming, and I really appreciate it. And I was really interested in what you had to say. It was a lot of insight that is great. So thank you again. All right. I will figure out this recording business otherwise. Thanks everyone for joining.